Contains a gallery of the writer and illustrator judges, a selection of the awards the contests have received, a library containing novels and art books published by winners and judges, and a selection of photos of some of our beloved keynote speakers and guests. For nearly 4 decades, L. Ron Hubbard's Writers of the Future contest has discovered and nurtured a steady stream of new authors and artists who have changed the face of science fiction. Chosen by an impressive panel of judges, drawn from the biggest names in the genre, contest winners are given the best possible foundation for a long-standing career. Now in its 3rd year, the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast continues to provide advice and tips from contest judges, industry professionals, and contest winners for writers and artists wanting to take their next step, along with needed inspiration to keep on going. If you are already a regular listener of this podcast, I thank you. If you are new to it, I welcome you to the weekly installment of the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast. This is John Goodwin, your host. Hello, and welcome to the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast. This is John Goodwin, your host. This podcast is dedicated to the aspiring writer or artist and will provide inspiration and tips from top professionals in the field, along with contest winners. And right now we're in the middle of the Writers of the Future week, where we have contest winners Em Dupre, who is the author of The Greater Good, illustrated by Jim Zacarria, who is an amazing illustrator. And we're going to talk about the art that he created and how he selected what he did to do what he did. So welcome, Em, and welcome, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, I mean, this is always the funnest part of the whole process, which is otherwise crazy, insanely busy, and everything else that goes on with it. But meeting the actual winners, the people, it's just, when you have this much creativity together at one time, it's a constant rush. And it makes really good to get that, because it's definitely not constant sleep. So
No sleep at all.
No, really.
So Em, how long have you been writing?
Well, I've been writing since I was 18. Seriously writing for the past 8 years, when I went to Orson Scott Card's boot camp.
Oh, good, yeah.
It was my first story, and I submitted it to him. I didn't know what else to do with it. I read Orson Scott Card. I submitted it to him. He accepted me in his boot camp. And that got me started with Writers of the Future, because that was the first thing he mentioned.
Yeah, he's a very good friend, and he's an amazing instructor and a brilliant writer.
Yeah, he really is.
Yes. And then, Jim, what about yourself as an artist?
Well, I've always been drawing and painting, but thinking to do it seriously didn't come to much later. I'm sort of an odd angle at this. I coming in at an odd angle, rather. I started doing graphic design first. And I loved it. I loved doing the graphic design. I started doing book cover design, which is, I always knew I would end up doing books. I thought I might be illustrating them, but I ended up doing the cover design. And I worked at that for many years. I worked at Little Brown, starting at Little Brown Publishers. So yeah, after a long time, I was feeling like I really want to create art again. So I started doing simple pieces. I'll tell you a story. What happened was, I was doing a cover for a musicologist, and I was sketching out sort of like what the idea I had, what I wanted to do. And he said, "It's great, it's great." And I said, "Okay, well, here is how I want to render it." And he said to me, "Well, no, just colorize the sketch." I said, "Really?" He said, yeah, I love the sketch. Colorize the sketch. So that is what ended up on the book cover. But I loved the concept so much that I did what I wanted to do for him, for me. Entered into an art show. Get a letter from the art show a couple weeks later. said, "We love what you did. We love your art. You should get larger space next time." And yeah, and, and you can keep going with it. And I did. And eventually I won an award with them, artist choice, the judge's choice rather. And I got another judge's choice award just 2 months ago for the body of work, not just one piece. So that was great. But yeah, that's kind of how I got started. I eased into it, starting to create the art for the book covers I was designing.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't for this genre, but I was creating art, and that's all I cared about. And I made the covers. Well, I made the covers experience of designing them much better for me because I can control everything.
Right.
And
They're great covers.
thank you. And I started getting more experience, because for each one cover I design, I'm doing, 10 or 20 comps. Designing covers, designing art for all of them. So, it's really, my chops are getting great. I said, wow, damn, I can paint in Photoshop now. So yeah, that's how I started wanting to desire to do it full time. And that's where I'm at.
Oh, good. Well, hope this can be a good assistance to like boost it up a bit more on success with a career.
It's been great.
Springboard.
Yes, absolutely. So now, Em, you wrote a story. It won Writers of the Future, The Greater Good, and it's an awesome title. And then getting into the story itself, what a concept. I actually haven't read stories, and when talking before this, our interview here, you start saying, oh, it's actually blah. So we're going to explore that now because it's fascinating when I start getting more of the backstory, how all the various stories, when they're put together, like where it came from. You're like, wow, I had no idea. I don't know why I liked it, but now I understand more why. So The Greater Good. So where did this story come from?
Well, to put it frankly, it's a sin eater that I put in space. And a sin eater is big in several cultures all over the world, from the Aztecs to the Welsh to the Middle East. And Catholicism uses it today when you go to confession, somebody who technically eats your sins. And that's where I got it from.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was familiar with Catholicism, but I didn't really view it as sin eaters. But now what you're explaining this thing here, yeah.
Right. It's where the black sheep comes from. They would sometimes eat a spiritual or a ritual meal. Everybody would put we'll just say a cake for lack of better examples, put all their sins, they talk to the cake. The sin eater would actually eat the cake and everybody would feel like they were absolved. Sometimes they would whisper it to a sheep and send the sheep out into the wild, and they got rid of all their sins for the year. And I think Catholicism, we all know they accepted a lot of pagan rituals and just changed it to make it more palatable.
And also to like expand their religion.
Exactly. To expand their religion, to take on the beliefs that people were already using, like Easter, and Christmas, say, we have this too. You can go ahead and forget your paganism. We're all inclusive. But that was one of the things. The sin eater is a confession, because everybody knows when they've done something wrong. I mean, hopefully it's inherent in you if you're not a psychopath. And I think even psychopaths know, they just enjoy it more.
One hopes.
They got to get something out of it, right? But I just took that concept and I thought to myself, there's always human nature, and people will do what they will do, whether they see it as good or bad. And I mean the little things, not the big things. I mean little things like little lies or stealing or being jealous or maybe falling out of love and cheating with somebody else. Even if you were on a generation ship, those things would not change in human nature. Now, the resulting of that, when you're confined in a small space, means you either have to have a prison or you need some way to deal with it. So
these people are on a ship. They've gotten a message from a superior race,
right?
And then the government tried to suppress it, but then
That's
somebody else
correct.
got it, broke the code, spread it all around the planet so they could all get it. And then they built a ship that transport these people, which would take, what, a couple hundred years?
Couple hundred years. And so in that couple hundred years, a lot of wrongdoing would be going on.
On this
So
big, huge ship, which they
exactly.
gave the formula how to make it.
That's right. And so there would be the part where people were on the ship who were born who didn't even want to be a part of this, but they're a part of this. So there's going to be trouble no matter what. But I just put it in small troubles, human troubles, stealing, jealousy, affairs, gambling, maybe a little recreational whatever on the side. But if they continued on in that way, that somebody would have to deal with it. And they didn't have space for a brig. Nobody wants to oversee prisoners. So the only way to deal with this would be to take it all away, to have a sin eater.
Yeah, that's just, like I said, to me, it seemed like a foreign concept until you just explained this. Now, like, it's not foreign at all.
No.
But I wasn't viewing it from the Catholicism, because that's the most current, at least here in America, that you see, and maybe not elsewhere, but
it is. It's the most current, but I kind of feel like if you have a confessor of any kind, whether it be a psychiatrist or a priest, it still results in the same thing. You want to unburden yourself.
right.
So I had Adrian Parrish be the person whom, whenever I tied it to brain functions, because when you ever feel guilt, it actually stimulates different parts in your brain. And so that's how I tied it in the science fiction world.
That's amazing. So now, when you read the story, how'd you arrive at this? Or did you pick different sections that you illustrated, and then it was Echo that helped direct you? Echo Chernick is the coordinating judge for the illustrators contest and is the art director for this.
Right. Well, it grabbed me right away. Sometimes it takes a few pages, but this story grabbed me right away. It really drew me in. Sometimes, not all the time, sometimes I get a good hit right away. And that's with the resulting piece I worked on, that's how it happened with this. I had this vision almost immediately.
So what you painted there is
right.
That was your first inspiration.
It is. I mean, I worked out other pieces. There's something. What's happening towards the end of the story is very interesting to me too. Very interesting.
Right.
And I was fighting with which one do I do, and I think in that case Echo helped, and because I presented everything and she said to me, well, you can do anything you want, but these are all good, but I like the first one. I said, yeah, that was my pick as well, and I was glad that she felt that way. So and then it came down to okay, how am I going to design the Redeemer? And that's what he calls his little machine there.
Yeah.
the Redeemer. And I started looking at MRI machines, but I thought they were just too clean, too slick. And in the story, and wrote that that they first looked like old diving bell helmets. So I said, well, what if I take that and I don't want it to look exactly like that, but a starting point, to designing the helmet. There are other elements other details that I mentioned in the story that I wanted to do, but then I started getting muddy really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted the concept to be clean. And I'm really happy with how I arrived, where I ended up with. And I think I made the right choices. In fact,
I think it's fantastic. I think it's a beautiful piece of art. It is clean. It says everything it needs to, and it's just gorgeous. It's perfect.
One thing also, though, I wanted to get down was a sense of place. And I said, well, I'm going to have to put planets behind there to express that this is happening in space,
right?
Not on Earth somewhere in some office or something. And they do mention the office in the story. And I explored that too. But no, I thought by having the actual helmet, the Redeemer, and with the plants behind that really and the composition too really helped. Like a lot of circle.
Yeah, having
kinda
his face in
circular,
the
yeah.
foreground and the white,
Yep.
the purifying light.
In fact, that's what I call the piece, purified.
Wow, absolutely. So now, Em, on your journey as a writer. So you've been, I mean, that's cool because Scott Card is definitely pushes people to writers of the future.
He really does. He says he does probably to you, but when you take the workshop, he said, and this is actually what I did. I have accumulated so many honorable mentions and silver honorable mentions from writers of the future over the past 8 years. And every story I wrote, he said, send it into them first. And if they don't buy it, then send it to somebody else. And that's what I did. And other people have bought other ones. But this was my last try, actually, because I would have pro'd out.
Pro'd out?
I would have pro'd out.
Wow. Well, congratulations to you on that, and well done on making it in the 11th hour.
I know. I was overjoyed. I am overjoyed. I'm still overjoyed.
So what's your plan now for yourself as an author?
Well, I've just finished my first book. It's called Incubation. I'm having an editor look at it right now, developmental. That way I know I'm doing it the right way. I've also written 3 graphic novels that I've been holding off on publishing because I really wanted this. I can't tell you how much I wanted this. I didn't care if I came in third. When I got that call from Joni, I was like, just let me place, because this is what I wanted. All of this is a dream come true. And if any aspiring writers are out there listening, do not give up. Those honorable mentions are just supposed to motivate you even more, because I've gotten enough of them,
But 8 years, I mean, some people, maybe it's something in America where it's the entitlement and the whole thing of like not having to, I don't want to wait. I need instant gratification, and publishing is not an instant gratification industry. If that's what you got, don't expect to have any happiness anytime soon.
No, if it's worth it, it's going to take longer than you think it is. And while the funny thing is that I was already preparing my next entry. I already had it written. And Joni always stays in wonderful contact with you. She's the reason why I'm here today. And I called her up.
Actually,
I'm like,
your storytelling quality is the reason why you're here today. I just want to make sure that's real, understood to you. You're here because you are an amazing writer.
That too, but she's a great motivator.
Okay, good.
Okay, Joni's a great motivator. When you are feeling low and you're like, I don't know if I can take one more honorable mention, she's like, some people don't even get that. I'm like, yeah, okay, you're right. I'll just go ahead, submit one more. And I was ready to submit, and I said, I didn't hear about the last one. She said, well, that's because you're a finalist. I was like, oh, I didn't know how to take it. I had a smile on my face for like 3 days. And then she said, well, that doesn't mean your place. I go, it doesn't matter at this point. It really didn't matter.
Was that your first time as a finalist?
It was my first time as a finalist. And it was, my story wasn't finished, so I just changed the scene in this one. I had gotten a silver honorable mention with the story. And then she said, well, you can resubmit if you've read it over and changed something. I added a new scene to it. And that was the difference between silver honorable mention and placing second, one scene. And I think my experience as a writer and being rejected so many times made me realize what I was actually missing. And it was, I could not have imagined this.
Wow. Yeah. And it's, I mean, you're halfway through right now, the week on this thing here, and there's still a lot more coming.
I can't imagine that either.
Yeah, there's still a lot more coming. So, Jim, yourself now, how many times did you enter? Are you one of those the first entry and you made it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
You're
that
one
was
of
it.
them.
That was it. Yeah, one of them.
You can see why
No, it's like it's amazing.
he is incredible. I'm surprised
thank
he's
you.
not on every book cover. I mean, look at this.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So your plan now, so because are you still doing the graphic design and the stuff you're doing?
I am doing, freelance. I'm still doing graphic design, yes. But I have a number of shows planned to do. Right after this, I'll be doing Gen Con. Well, but not right after this. It'll be happening in August.
Right.
They all come in at the same time, so I'm going from one to another really quickly, within a week.
Another really good art show too is Dragon Con.
I did it.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I did it. And that's how I found about this.
Oh, good.
Okay. A Dragon Con. Yeah, I haven't applied yet for this year. I'm going to see if I can get in this year. But yes, I'm going to be doing Gen Con, and then as soon as I come back from that, 2 days, another 2 days, I do Boston Comic Con.
Good. You fit
right.
right in there.
Yes. Yeah. I do well there. And yeah, it's my backyard.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
So, so you keep on doing the because that right now pays the bills, and then doing your other art, your fine art, and so are you going to go in the direction of doing the sci-fi fantasy stuff, or are you just like all over the place? Okay,
No. It's a sci-fi fantasy. All these shows I'm doing, that's all I'm submitting. Usually, music is a great motivator, and influence me. I will sometimes hear just the name of a song or a lyric, and that'll give me an idea for a painting.
Wow.
Yeah.
So your paintings now, do you do what format?
Yeah, it's all digital right
Photoshop?
now. Yes,
Okay.
Photoshop.
Have you ever experimented with like chalks or doing it with?
Yeah. I mean, I have my studio split in half. Where I have all the traditional media equipment on one side and digital on the other. Yeah.
Is there a preference?
He's got his ENIAC on one side.
Well, what happens? What I fall into is I'm doing these projects, the graphic design projects. It's so easy just to stay there and jump into Photoshop and start painting, rather than jumping into my traditional artwork area. But a lot of times I'll start with a traditional rendered drawing, and then bring that into Photoshop or whatever I'm using to help move it along.
You said you made sketches. I asked him about his process,
Mhm.
and he said that they turn in sketches and then they have to turn in more detailed sketches.
Mhm.
So are you sketching by hand or is this a sketch on a computer?
The first round was by hand, and then the next 3 rounds, were brought into the computer.
Yeah, it's made a wonderful difference, I think, in the art for the books in general. There's been a major escalation in quality when Echo took over and started doing the art direction, because I mean, she does that. She's very good with that. And obviously Lazarus that's what he's been, as an art director for 30 years. And he's been secretly entering the contest for 3 years as Lazarus Black.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he's an Illustrators of the Future Judge.
That explains a lot.
Yeah, he wanted to be a writer all along, but it was too hard for him. So then he went to art school and became a full career as that.
Oh yeah, because illustration is just so easy. Writing is so difficult. I'll just pick up a pencil.
And so he couldn't master it, and so he went to art and did that and became a career, 30 years with that. But he always secretly harbored his goal to be a published writer. And so he started entering the contest. He was one of the first ones that did the workshop. He did a workshop, I think, 3 times, and he kept on submitting, and then
good for
he'd get
him.
his honorable mentions and be all excited about it. And then we had to, when it was announced that he was going to win, we couldn't announce it, who he was really, because we wanted to, because he was a first place winner. So we had to be careful how to do that, because you can't let the first place writer winners be known, because they could be disqualified if one of the judges cross flows it, then they have to,
Right.
it can,
Good for him.
yeah. So he's one of those super stories when he got his phone calls,
Good
that he
for
was a
him.
finalist and then he was a winner. It was just like, so it wasn't just the last few years. It's something since a child wanting to be, but never could, never validated for it, never encouraged. And
It happens,
Yeah.
you say you want to go in the art world. Luckily enough, I don't want to say it. My mom's a hippie, and so she made pots. And so any kind of creativity, she was a painter, and she used to try and get me to paint. I'm like, I can't paint. I'm not a painter. But words, I love words. I can paint with words.
yeah,
And so I didn't have that same barrier. The only barrier I had was my own mental self-esteem issues on whether or not this was good, whether or not it was bad. It's a big hurdle to overcome. I think
every author's got it. And even some of our judges still have the imposter syndrome that they deal with. And you kind of like, oh, come on.
you'll never, we were walking to lunch today and there was a sign in front of the parking garage that says no validation. And I took a picture in front of it because I'm like, that's how you feel. No matter where you get in your life, you're going to be in front of that no validation sign, feeling that exact same way. So if you feel that way, go take a picture on the sign. It's on Hollywood Boulevard.
I think I saw a commercial that was something like that in a way where, there was a waitress serving some people, and the woman asked, what she does, what she's going to school for. She goes, "I'm going to school for art." She goes, "Oh, that's nice. Have you figured out what you're going to do for a living yet, though?"
Always that, right?
Right.
You find a way. You really
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
And what's great too with the judges, you got the judges who are so willing to accept you into the fold. It's like the contest, by the time you win and come here, you're not being viewed as someone going to a workshop to learn some basics of writing or illustration. You're here because you already know how to do illustration. You already know how to write. Now you're getting how to make a career as a writer or an artist. It's a whole different perspective, and you're not competition.
It's true. I don't know how it is with illustrators, but writers will help you every step of the way. They are always willing to put their hand out so you can step up on that horse. They're willing to give you that information. And I've never heard of any other industry where everybody who's successful is waiting to help you up. I think that's the great thing about
Yeah.
writing. It's non-discriminatory. You don't know who you look like. It's all about what you can do, and the people who are on top are willing to come down and give you a hand. And I think that says a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very true. I find that in the art world. I mean, especially for this genre, I find that because everybody I've met so far have been very helpful. I couldn't say enough good things about them.
Yeah, and we got some of the most amazing artists and authors.
Incredible artists. The names, you have to bow down to the names that have walked through these hollowed halls.
Yeah.
Yes. When it was amazing when I met Octavia Butler. She invited me to her home, and I went in there, and we had a tea, and she was all of her walls were just bookshelves, just books. She really loved Hubbard's fiction and a lot, so we talked about that, but talked about her too. She's her life, and an amazingly lovely woman, and she became a judge. I got her to agree. She agreed, and she became a judge for the Writers of Future contest, and it was a couple months later, she took ill and she passed. But it was, maybe I should put a thing on our writers judges,
You should.
photo of her, because
She's wonderful. She's
yeah.
an idol of mine.
Yeah. What she did, both for just the Black community, but also for females, for underprivileged, for everything that was like, in the 60s was just, shunned.
She represented a lot.
She represented a whole lot. But talking to her, meeting her, she, like I said, she was such a wonderfully nice and gentle person. She didn't drive. She took public transport everywhere she went. That's all she got around was the buses. And she was, she talked about when she was in school. It was a small school she went to, and it was a very small library. And she read everything, every science fiction and fantasy book. She read it all.
Wow.
She was a voracious reader, which is something that's not in common with writers. And then she started writing, and she wrote and wrote and wrote, and definitely had barriers to overcome, but she kept on writing. And she wrote an essay for Writers of the Future, volume 8 maybe, called Furor Scribendi. But it was an article she wrote for Writers of the Future. It was published in that. And after her passing, then her agent asked for rights to be able to republish it in a book of her essays, collected essays, which
I'll have to read that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that existed.
Yeah.
I've only read her short stories, but Kevin Anderson told me something today, which was, he said that for some people, and I believe this is true, that once you read science fiction and fantasy, it activates a previously dormant gene in you. And all of a sudden you turn into some rabid creature who just goes seeking it. And it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
It's like zombie, I need brains. And that's a wonderful story.
Yeah.
I'm glad you shared that about Octavia Butler. She's such a hero of mine. She and James Tiptree Jr., the fact, I think women science fiction writers mean more than anything. They're such an inspiration.
Yeah. We've had, the number of people we've had as our judges and people that have worked with us over the years. I'm going to share with you some of the different names, but I don't know how much you track artists and art.
I do a lot.
Frank Frazetta was a judge.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, yep. I when his museum opened up in Stroudsburg, I was down there the first year it opened. Yeah, this is the stuff that I grew up.
I was just at the
idolizing.
opening of his museum 2 months ago in his home in Boca Grande.
Right.
And there was about 30 of his pieces, original artwork there, which is just amazing because that's like at least $30 million worth of work there. But that was the home they lived in, and that's where he died, in that home.
I heard he had a stroke and he taught himself how to draw again with his other hand.
Right.
I mean, how incredible is that? I mean, what kind of courage
he was just
must
a
you have?
genius. He was an absolute genius. But we've had like over the years, I don't know if you are familiar with Leo and Diane
I
Dillon.
do. Oh, yes.
Yeah. So Diane's got an article in this volume coming out.
Oh, okay.
That she wrote. How it's called The Third Artist. How they work together.
Yes, they did say that. They met. I heard her speak about that many times.
Yeah. And then like Will Eisner, who's the
Yep.
Eisner Award is
I
after
have
him.
all of his books.
Oh,
Really?
I have
so
Will Eisner.
he was a judge. Yeah, H.R. Van Dongen. There's Frank
that's
Frazetta.
Frank. Yep.
You've got Frank Kelly Freas, who's
Yep.
just brilliant of the artists of the
I picked up
Golden
his
Age.
book. I picked up his book just when I was starting art school.
Yeah, and then let's see. Like I said there's Frank. Yeah, Larry
yeah.
Elmore is just.
I was just downstairs with him. I cornered him, and
So you got these amazing artists, and there's Jack Kirby, Paul Lair, Gary Meyer just passed away last year. He was one of the senior instructors at the art school here in Pasadena.
okay.
We've had, let's see, with Sean Tan, he was a winner back in volume 6 or something like that, 7, and he went on to win an Oscar half a dozen years or so ago. He's one of our judges there from New Zealand.
Yep.
But it's just brilliant artists that we've got. These are all many of the major players in science fiction and fantasy art and illustration, and then obviously the judges that we have for the writers contest are equally as celebrated with what they've done.
Very much so.
So part of what I try to do on this podcast is advice and tips, and now speaking to you as professionals, get used to it. Because you've weathered the storm. Some people aren't willing to entry after entry, year after year, reject after reject. I mean, Kevin is probably one of the highest paid science fiction authors in America. And he boasts himself having the most rejects of anybody. 10 years ago, he said, I got over 750 rejects. I said, I still get rejects, and I mean, it's definitely not an industry for thin skin.
Right.
Either one.
Sure.
Either one there. So advice or tips and also hurdles that you had to overcome that you almost succumbed to, but didn't. Okay, you're on.
For me, something I learned is that there's no perfect time to write. You just write whenever you can. Rituals, whatever. I was living in New York at the time. And if I went to the library, I used to go to the public libraries to write because I knew if I went there, I was going to get down to business. Just write whenever you can, all the time, and the word no actually means nothing to me now. I feel like that's just part of the conversation, Don't take no as being a discouragement. It's actually an encouragement to try harder if it means something to you. And if it doesn't mean something to you, that it's fine. If you want to quit, it's fine. Then it means you don't have the backbone for this, and that's okay too. But you have to kind of develop like you said, a thicker skin. You have to know what's important to you. If story is important to you, if expression is important to you, if creating is important to you, then keep writing.
Good.
I think the hurdle for me was getting myself out there, push myself out there. When it's the same thing with them, I would find the time, between book cover assignments, I would find the time to paint, to create, my visions, and a lot of them just were self-initiated visions. And I just started putting myself out there. I attended, one show, had just a few smattering of pieces in there, and then another one had more stuff, and that's what I've been at, just building, and always painting, always doing it. So always demanding the highest quality of myself. I would trash something and start all over again if I just think it was what wasn't going the right way. If it's an easy fix, it's an easy fix. But if it isn't, I'll scrap it.
Yeah. There's sometimes a false perception that you write a book, so it should sell. You do a painting, it should sell, and there seems to be no leeway for a gradient to becoming a writer, to becoming an artist, whereas some things, if you're going to make a piece of furniture, it better be good. Otherwise, no, that's it's expected to be good. But on a writer, you need to be willing to throw away the first however many stories, or your artist, your first however many, until you can make a cloud that looks like a cloud.
It's a learning experience.
Yeah.
You learn by doing. I think artists actually have an advantage over, illustrators, because I think we're all artists, maybe. Who knows?
We are.
I think they have an advantage because we're only validated if somebody buys our work. You can keep producing work
Right.
ad infinitum, and maybe it's good, maybe it's not, but it's a constant learning experience. We will only gain that recognition if somebody actually buys whatever short story that we
Sure,
do. So
right.
we can keep producing them, but if they're not worthy, nobody's ever going to buy them. You know,
Well, I don't know if yeah, I agree somewhat. I mean, you don't need a publisher to pick up your work anymore. I mean, there are plenty of indie authors out there now.
That's true, but if it's you do have
I know
to learn.
I understand what you're saying. Yes,
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying.
yeah, there's
know,
you want there to be gatekeepers. You want somebody to say whether or not you've reached this hurdle and you're good. I found one of the best learning experiences was this website called Critters, where you're supposed to give critiques on other people's writing.
Mhm.
That's the first place I ever saw Ken Liu, who was actually another finalist
Yeah.
here. And you would read all of these.
And our forum has won Critters twice now as the best forum.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Well, Critters, it is everything from 0 to 100. And you have to read, these stories get delivered to your email and you read them. After a while, you start to realize this is bad, you know?
Okay, sure. Yeah, okay,
You
right.
know?
Yep.
And I recognize this in my own writing.
Right.
So I'm going to get rid of it. This is how we work.
Okay.
But you are able to actually sketch out something and keep improving it. We got to erase all the words.
Yeah,
You can make your sketch into a Mona Lisa. We got to burn it and start it from scratch.
Well, look, in the end, if you have desire, real desire, you're not gonna be able to get rid of it. That's an itch you gotta scratch.
It's true. It's all.
I think
hard.
that's a senior datum on this whole thing here is it's an itch you've got to scratch. A real writer has got to write. It doesn't matter. I've got to write. An artist, Larry Elmore, you've been talking to him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he said, I've always had to draw. I just always have to draw, and his wife will tell him, says, look, you're not helping anything right now. Just go draw, 'cause that's all he wants to do is draw, and he's 73, I think he's now. And he says, I just want to paint. That's all I want. I just want to paint. I could just, if I didn't have to sleep, I would love it. I'd paint all the time. He has to do it. He's got these visions and he's such an amazingly brilliant artist.
Yep.
He just paints such good things that, but that's what he is. He's an artist.
Right.
It's a weird little addiction, right? I mean, you have to drag yourself to do it. It makes you feel better when you do, but then after you do it, you're like, this sucks. And then the whole cycle starts all over again. You drag yourself to do it, This is the way you express it.
All down the line, even the piece I did for your story, I kept looking at it, even after it had been accepted. I said, well, I want to let me change something here. I want to let me do this. I you want to dabble with it, still some more, but but sometimes you just gotta
let it go.
Yeah.
There's like a couple words I want to change, and I'm sitting here and I know exactly what page it's on. I'm like, if I can just change that word, and I was trying to find a way to do it. Just got to learn to let it go.
It's done.
Let it go.
So now on the workshop, it's based on a lot of L. Ron Hubbard essays. That's how it was actually built originally by Algis Budrus. Any of those essays that particularly resonated with you?
Yeah. Like I told you, when Orson Scott Card told me about this, I actually read one of the assignments. I've read all of his essays. So they gave me this book. I'm like, I already read this a long time ago. I searched it out. And even on my computer, you'll see something called the Manuscript Factory. I named it because of L. Ron Hubbard. When I read his Manuscript Factory, that it resonated with me to the point where I actually read it every New Year's. I have the essay saved. I have my Manuscript Factory, and I remind myself of what he said. And it was important for me when I was first starting out to read that you are a manuscript factory, that you have to believe in yourself. You have to put the time in. Not everything will work, And for any new writer that there is, read that essay. That essay needs to be number one on your reading list. It'll change your life.
So you do have an opinion.
I have a strong opinion. Every computer I have has Manuscript Factory in it because of L. Ron Hubbard.
Okay, good.
That's a nice little ritual. Every
it
New Year's
is.
New Year's Eve.
It's a reminder as I
also
start the new year.
I also try to do a new piece every January. Right from New Year's, bang, get into it.
That's good. Any of the, because you were given as there the book called Art, which is a collection of various essays.
Yes.
Anything from there that particularly resonated with yourself?
Yeah,
So,
I'm sorry, but when I started reading it, I really I want to read more, and I started looking at some of the other things in the back of things we weren't talking about in the workshop, and I said I got to read this, but we just haven't had a chance to.
Yeah, I understand that. In the book itself, one of the first essays in there is called Art, and there he talks about art is the quality of communication, and I think one of the things that they went over was you can go so much into the correction and trying to make it perfect that you lose the communication value of the art.
You just reminded me. Yes, you just reminded me that did resonate. As I explained earlier, a lot of times it happens to me. I don't know why, but my first inclination, my first idea is usually my best. I don't know why. I don't know where it comes from. I'm sorry I can't explain it.
That's the spark of creativity. I mean, that's like the essence of your creation on that.
And just right. And if I go on, I get bogged down with details and and misdirection and and I feel like I need to scrub it all, go back to my first thoughts about it. And I don't know why that happens with me, but it does. Not all the time, but most of the time.
Yeah, he didn't get into doing all the edits, and he's just, I mean, he was definitely in a league of his own there. He had a composition speed of 92 words a minute, and he would submit stories to the magazines in New York, first draft, first submission, and they sell, and so he's writing 100,000 words a month and writing 3 hours a day, 3 days a week. That was his schedule. I mean, he was fast, but he wrote a lot, and he wrote millions and millions of words. But he was a consummate artist. He did a lot of work with painting and illustration art. He's got, I think, 3 gold albums. He wrote the music and the lyrics to it. He was a prize-winning photographer.
Wow.
Kodak used to send film to him to test it.
Wow.
Underachiever.
Yeah, I'm jealous.
Yeah, he was very busy and very dedicated, but he had the viewpoint of like, don't do anything as an amateur. So if he takes something on, he just wanted to work to be a professional. But he worked with both writers and artists quite a bit in the 30s and 40s, and that's why he started the contest. And he was one of the most qualified to do the contest. And because he was one of the most successful writers, best paid, he's endowed this contest, and it's he's continues to endow it, even now, nearly 4 decades after launching the contest. So it's I mean, that datum of art is a quality of communication, obviously in illustration and painting, but it's also in writing, where you've got sometimes a writer, they write, I need to correct it again. And when you had Dean Wesley Smith talking, he probably addressed that a bit, because he publishes 75 to 80,000 words a month in his magazine.
Yeah, he's very prolific too. I think I have to think that people like that are just another breed unto themselves. There's some kind of crazed virus that they have that I have not yet gotten. But he actually didn't so much touch on that. Dean Wesley Smith I think he should be cherished through the ages. He is a singular person.
He was the first person to be recognized by the contest in Volume 1. And the story's in here. This is the first volume.
Isn't that crazy? It's sometimes so hard for me to believe the people who walk through these doors. Like Dave Farland. I always got, and it made me sad when he passed, because I always got his blog. I had it delivered to my email, and he would always talk about when he entered the contest and how he did it and what they're looking for and everything. And somebody as prolific as that is always going back to their roots and trying to inspire other people, like Dean Wesley Smith. He was the first person. He's back here today. Isn't that incredible?
Yeah. And no, and several of the judges that will be talking to you, or several of the judges that we have, were themselves winners. I mean, it makes sense. Almost 4 decades now. There's a lot of people that have won over the years. Absolutely.
Yeah, when I looked at the list of judges they have, I said, well, I know all these people. Wow. And I
Yeah.
didn't know. Yeah.
Robert Silverberg. I mean, come on.
Yeah, and almost all of them, they're on the podcast. So Bob Silverberg's on there. Yeah, obviously anybody that's if they weren't alive up to 3 years ago, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get everybody. Some of these, a lot of them we had video interviews on that we're able now to. We're getting those things edited and put out, and we're going to have a whole series of these interviews posted. We're going to be releasing our first one Friday night at the awards event with a special video, which there are none that exist on Frank Frazetta.
I kind of ran into accidentally saw a clue about that.
Yeah, so that's going to be very exciting. But then after that, we got videos with Anne McCaffrey, and that I'm anxious to show Todd, because Todd hasn't seen them. We've got a whole series of the masters with them. They're all beloved judges, for the contest. So we had all these interviews that we're now pulling them out. That were recorded years ago, and
Why didn't you do this before? These are great.
we wanted to wait for you to arrive, Em.
Oh,
We've been
thank
waiting for you to
you.
actually make it.
That's what I thought.
Okay, yes. So we're down to our last 7 minutes or so. So on your own, what was the thing that you almost quit writing over that you then had to overcome?
Oh, look, receiving rejections is they're depressing. Okay. I can make a house full of all the rejections that I got. I think it wasn't until I learned to keep sending things out that I already had kind of hope in the wind. So the rejection I got wasn't nearly as bad because I already had something else going. And so it was only until that I did that I didn't get so discouraged. But I'm unfortunately one of those people who really doesn't take no for an answer. I feel like it's the beginning of a negotiation. And so at this point I was kind of fighting with myself. And I'm always going to win.
Good.
Either
Well, that's
way.
absolutely the right attitude for sure. But that's something that people have to understand too, that ultimately it's their drive that's going to make it happen. Nobody else can tell you to sit down and write that story. Nobody else can say, don't succumb.
Yeah, if what man has done, man can do. If people have started in worse instances than I did, I think about Charles Dickens with his plume and his ink pen. I've got a computer and electricity. There is no excuse for me not to get published. I don't have 5 kids running around. There's no excuse.
Yeah.
I have an
sure.
indoor bathroom. These kind of things they resonate.
Sure. Yeah.
And what about yourself?
Well, I think it was not being able to find the time to do quality work. I think that that's the only thing. That's the hurdle I had to get past. I think to get where I am now. But then I eventually did, and and I started, getting more momentum, and I just wanted to keep the momentum going. And the funny story about this, I almost didn't do this. I filled out the application halfway. I think Johnny got in touch with me and said, oh, we noticed that.
Yeah, one of the drills she does is she goes through and finds all these people that started and finished and starts writing to them to finish entering the contest.
Well, my thing was, I stopped because, am I qualified? I mean, because I do graphic design.
She got with me on
Am I allowed to do this?
Yeah, she got with me on you.
Right. And, but when I thought about it, nobody's hired me to do, commission, an illustration from me. And, the work I'm doing anyway. So, but I wasn't, not doing professionally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. So in terms of when you visit yourself now, going like, what have you gotten now so far after the first half of this workshop of how you want to take your career at this point?
It just energized me. Listening to the speakers, meeting some of the other, winners as well. I can't wait to go home. I cannot wait to go home and get back to working.
I know the feeling. I know the feeling.
I mean, I love it here. I love the experience and everything, but I can't wait to go home and really work harder even,
Feels like you stepped on a new ledge. Like when you're playing Super Mario Brothers and you jump on the pipe and then there's a cloud and you jump on the cloud and then you're like, oh, there's another cloud. You just jumped on that other cloud and got like the 3 stars.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
I used to play Pong.
There are no clouds in Pong.
No, they're not. There's a paddle. Sometimes you can do 2 balls. I got good with 2 balls.
I'll leave that one alone.
The 2 paddles.
Yeah, I know. The one that go up and down, and then you got so far into it that they throw another ball in, and you're like working double time.
Exactly. Anyway, I didn't really progress in my video games, obviously.
Not since 1984.
Yeah. I guess not.
You should try Halo. Give Dead Space a try.
Wow. Yeah. Keeping with the podcast, I literally have to read a book a week to keep up with all my interviews, because I won't interview an author unless I've read a book of theirs. And it's easier with this contest because I just have read a short story, but for any of the other authors, it's sometimes it's quite an investment. So that keeps me busy.
Have you ever been really moved by a short story that you read? And if so, which one?
Yes. It's actually, there's a lot of them. And it's when I find out what they're about, there's several in the book that we just released. And sometimes, like talking to you about what the story is, it gives me more like, wow, okay, obviously I have my own experiences that relate, to different things. But when I get more of what the backstory is or how it relates to somebody, then it's just like, wow, that was really touching. That was really special. It happens to me a lot. I'm one of those it's easy for me to get emotional. Marty Cove, who's the guy from Karate Kid. He's a good friend, and when he's here in town, he does those shows. He would have been down there doing one of those shows with us. But my wife used to joke with him, my husband's so emotional. He said, no, I'm really emotional too. He said, no, he's really emotional. He said, no, I'm really emotional too. He says, he cries at America Got Talent auditions. Okay, he's
he wins.
That's funny.
Anyway, it's been great talking to the both of you. So for someone to find out more about you, Em, how do they find you?
emdupre.com.
Excellent. And yourself?
We can see my work at jimzacarriaart.com. You can see my book cover design at zacdesign.com. And you can reach me at zacdesigncomcast.net.
Great. So we'll also put this in the actual description on the podcast too, so people get that.
All right, fantastic.
Anyway, as I knew it would be, the hour went really fast and it was so much fun. And thank you for listening. Subscribe to the Writers of the Future podcast wherever you get your podcasts. The Writers of the Future podcast is available on SoundCloud, iTunes, Pocket Casts, Stitcher, Player FM, iHeart, and Spotify. We've also been syndicated on the United Public Radio Network, where you can find these podcasts as well. The Writers of the Future series can be purchased wherever books are sold in the U.S., Canada, the UK, Australia, and South Africa, and available everywhere else on Amazon. Writers and Illustrators of the Future are contests created by L. Ron Hubbard to provide a means for the aspiring writer and artist to be seen and acknowledged. It is free to enter and open to new and amateur short story writers and artists of science fiction or fantasy. Again, thank you very much, Em and Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hour at a time. For more information, please visit thegalacticconnection.com.
You are listening to UPRN 107.9 New Orleans.
Tune in to UFO Undercover, Wednesday.
Galaxy Audio presents Battlefield Earth, a saga of the year 3000 by L. Ron Hubbard.
Part 1, Chapter 1.
Man
Said Turl.
is an endangered species.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Benetti, and along with Joe Montale.